Keeping It Due, episode 5, guys. Welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this here podcast. I am your boy, David Moito, the host for this here podcast. If you are new here, welcome. I hope you stick around. We do have a lot of fun on this here podcast. If you are listening to this through Audacity, not Audacity. Why do I keep saying Audacity? Audacity is what I record this on. I record using Audacity. So any of you guys, actually, if you guys are interested in starting a podcast, I use Audacity to record and edit these podcasts. So you can use it. It's a really nice, and it's free. So if you have a Windows machine or even an Apple machine, it does a pretty decent job. So if you just want to just go after it and do it, use Audacity. But this podcast is available on Anchor/Keeping It Due. That's for the audio only platform. If you want to listen to this podcast on audio only, Anchor is the place to go. Not Audacity, Anchor. I remember I made that mistake on the last podcast, so this time I just want to correct that. I just want to make sure that you guys go to the right place. Also, youtube.com/Keeping It Due, or just search Keeping It Due. You will find the podcast on there. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment if you're on YouTube. If you're listening to this via YouTube, please do like and comment, because the engagement really does help the growth of the channel. It really does help people see that, and the algorithm especially, that this channel is active and people are engaging with the content that is on there. And it really helps me, really helps the community potentially grow, because it reaches other people, it pushes it to the recommendations, etc., blah blah blah, technicalities. You get the drill, okay? So thank you so much. I would appreciate that. Now, before we go on to what I want to talk about today, I just want to say a huge thank you to all the healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, staff, and all that have been in the front line during this pandemic. It has been really rough so far. It has taken this COVID-19 disease has taken quite a few doctors, especially here and across the world. It's taken so many doctors, so many people who are putting their lives on the line just to treat and care for us during this pandemic. They're doing it and they're sacrificing themselves so that we can be able to at least have a leg up during this pandemic. So I just want to say thank you and a huge appreciation. Those of you who may know somebody who is a healthcare professional that is out there in the front lines, even just sending them a simple text message just to say we appreciate you and we see you and recognize the work that you're doing, they would greatly appreciate it. And my heart goes out to all those lives that have been lost, both doctors and other people, patients who have contracted the disease. My heart goes out to the families and the loved ones out there. This is a very difficult time. This is a very difficult period, but I do believe that we will get through this. This too shall pass. So I just wanted to say that. I just wanted to put that out there. So prayers up. We'll get through this. And guys, please, for the love of God, just follow the guidelines, follow the protocols, because they're there to help. They're there to help mitigate the effect of this disease. So if it's wearing a mask in public, please do that. If it's social distancing, please do that. If it's just washing your hands and sanitizing, please do that. If it's just staying home when you don't really need to go to crowded places, please do that as well. It's not only for your benefit, but it's for your neighbor's benefit, because just as much as you may not display symptoms, even if you have the disease, or maybe your body is able to handle the disease a lot better than the next person, you don't know what potentially might happen to your neighbor or someone else who you didn't intentionally give the disease to. You don't know how their body may react. They may get a really bad reaction to it. So just for the sake of them, just follow the guidelines. It is just a temporary season. We will get through this, but we have to get through this together. We have to do our part. We have to play our part. Okay? Cool. Now, all the doom and gloom pushed to the side. It's now time to talk about this past week. One of my favorite childhood television shows did a reunion. And it was, I haven't had a chance to see it yet. I really want to see it. It was on HBO Max. If you don't know what I'm talking about by now, it is Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, starring Will Smith. One of my favorite television shows growing up. I grew up watching this show a lot, although I did grow up in one of those households where you weren't really allowed to watch a lot of TV, but I still used to sneak in a few hours of television here and there, because this show, The Cosby Show, I used to watch Living Single, although at the time that Living Single was airing, I was a bit young. I was a bit too young to be listening to that stuff, but I still enjoyed those shows. A lot of those black television shows, One-on-One, The Parkers, Moesha. By the way, all of those Girlfriends, all of those television shows, by the way, if you want to go down the nostalgia trip, they are available on Netflix. So if you guys, a lot of those black sitcoms are now available on Netflix. So watch it. I mean, it'll take you back. And I still feel like they hold the same kind of power. The messages that they used to have on those particular shows still hold value, and they're still relevant, and I still find it so hilarious. I sometimes watch Fresh Prince once in a while, even now, and I still find it really, really funny, and especially now that I can understand some of the jokes that they were making a lot better, because when you're young, some things fly over your head and you're like, you miss it, but when you're older and you go back and you watch something, you pick up on things that you wouldn't have picked up on when you were younger, and now that's what's happening with me. So it's quite interesting watching those shows that you grew up on now as an adult. But anyway, we're getting beyond what we're here for, which is the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. If you don't know about the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, here's a brief synopsis, yeah? It's actually in the theme song. Now this is a story all about how my life got turned upside down, and I'd like to take a moment, just sit right there, and I'll tell you how I became the French. That part always gets me. And I'll tell you how I became the prince of a town called Bel-Air. I butchered that, but you get the point. So it's about this guy. He came from Philadelphia. He was raised in a not so great neighborhood, and he was getting into some kind of trouble over there. So what his mother does, his mother has a brother who lives in a really affluent neighborhood in the other side of the US, a place called Bel-Air in California, in Los Angeles, in the general Los Angeles area. And he goes and he lives there, and he has a totally different lifestyle. He's used to a totally different lifestyle than the one that he's now living. And now he went when he was in high school, so he's pretty much grown up and developed under the hood, basically. And now he's being put in an affluent neighborhood. He's with really, really rich people who really didn't go through the same kinds of struggles as him. So it's a different culture that he's getting involved in. And that's what the whole premise of the show is about, his adventures and him going through this shift with a family that is typically a different dynamic than the one that he was used to. His mother was a single mother. His father had walked out on him. By the way, one of my favorite episodes was, and it's actually one of the most talked about, it has one of the most talked about scenes from Fresh Prince. The one where, how come you don't want me, Uncle Phil? How come you don't want me, man? When he was talking about his father had walked out on him a second time. That was one of my favorite episodes as well. That it was really, really powerful. By the way, that show had some really, really powerful moments in it, Brief rundown on the cast of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Of course, you have Will Smith, the character Will Smith. Then you have Hilary Banks, who was played by Carla Parsons. Then you had Carlton Banks, who was played by Alfonso Ribeiro. Then you had Vivian Banks, who was played by two people. Okay, you had the original Aunt Viv, the dark-skinned Aunt Viv. And by the way, there was some drama that was addressed during the reunion, why she left after the third season. So they had a sit down with Will, and she basically revealed that she didn't necessarily get kicked off the show. What happened was, during the third season, the show had offered her a contract that she basically couldn't agree to. They had slashed her salary. They said that she wasn't allowed to work on anything else other than the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which limited her revenue stream. And at that time, she had young kids. Her husband at the time was out of work. So basically, she was the sole breadwinner, and they were limiting her income. So she was like, I can't accept this. And she felt like she was being given a raw deal. Thus, she left. It really wasn't, well, at least that's what she says in the interview that she had with Will Smith. Of course, you don't really know what happens behind the scenes. You don't really know whether there's other deep-rooted drama that's going on. But what she revealed during that was exactly that it just was a raw deal that she was being given, and she felt like she really shouldn't be sticking around for all of that. So that's why she left, and that's why the show basically had to scramble, because it was nearing shooting for the following seasons, and they needed an Aunt Viv. Aunt Viv needed to be there. You can't have the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air without that mother figure in there. So they had to scramble, and they found another actress. They found another actress who could basically take up the slack. I don't know her actual real name, but she became known as light-skinned Aunt Viv. And even her character arc, if you notice from the seasons where she was the one playing Aunt Viv, she really wasn't being given priority in terms of the show, the particular episode being centered around her adventures. Whereas the original Aunt Viv, now Janet, she was given storylines that were basically centered around her. But I really felt that she was really, really talented, and she was hilarious. She had this different kind of energy and vibrance. She had this drama. I remember there was this one episode where she decided to go and take one of these dance classes, one of these modern dance classes, and she's the oldest person in that particular class. And she's being made fun of by all her classmates in the dance class. Like, how is this older lady thinking that she can be able to keep up with us and all that, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end of the episode, when she's performing, she kills it. She probably does even way better than everybody else. And then she even gives it to the two particular the group of girls who really were giving her a hard time. She just gave it to them. She gave them a snap and walked off. She was like, I killed this. I'm the one who showed up and showed out. And that was so cool. She had many layers to peel back, original Aunt Viv. But because of now the way they had written her, or written for her, because they knew the particular actress who was playing her at the time, Aunt Viv, could be able to take on such a storyline. But this new Aunt Viv, she just needed to be there to kind of be like the glue. You know what I mean? Like they had already established that an Aunt Viv exists in the Fresh Prince universe, so they just needed to maintain that. But they also didn't want to push it so much, because at the same time there was such a drastic change. You had one Aunt Viv that looks totally different from the other one. You didn't want to confuse the audience too much, so that's why they did what they had to do. This show was so impactful for so many different people. It basically, the same way that the Cosby Show displayed a family in the US at that particular time that the US wasn't used to seeing on the big screen. The type of family where two parents are present, all the kids are going to school and are serious about going to school. They both are living in a decent neighborhood. They both have decent jobs. That kind of family dynamic really wasn't, people weren't used to seeing that in mainstream media. And what that show did, both Fresh Prince and The Cosby Show, what that show did was show people that, yes, black people do live those kind of lives, and they are present in the world. And just to show that the stereotypical black family doesn't have to be that of all of them growing up in very poor neighborhoods, living very dangerous lives, where there's crime happening right outside their doorstep, drug dealers, dope dealers, pimps, all that bad stuff doesn't really happen to every single black family or African American family in the US. So that's what they were trying to display, and that's why a lot of the messaging in Fresh Prince went back and forth between those two realities. You had the reality of where Uncle Phil and his family versus Will's mother out in Philadelphia, in the hood that he came from. So, and he would even bring it up. He would bring up those contrasts of how life was where he came from compared to the kind of life that Will was living in at the present, during the present. There was even an episode where they went back in time. They went back to an old apartment that they used to live in. Now, Uncle Phil's family, the Bel-Air family, there was an apartment that they used to live in, really, really tiny, in a not so great neighborhood, and it was basically showing them their roots. They weren't always living that lavish, luxurious lifestyle. They also came from a place of hardship, and that's the reality of a lot of families in the world. Not everybody is born into a life of silver spoons. Some people have to build their way up to that greatness. And that's one thing that I think the show was really, really good at, of reminding people that. And my favorite episodes on that particular show really showcased the sense of family and the togetherness. Like, there was this episode, especially displaying the relationship that Carlton, who was Will's cousin, and Will, those two were brothers in that show. Like, you can't tell me anything else. Those two were brothers. They were cousins, but they were brothers. So what happened was they were at an ATM and they were trying to withdraw money. And then they ended up getting robbed. Will, trying to defend Carlton, ends up getting shot. So that episode, Carlton is having this, he's having this moment of reflection of, is he weak? Is he easily preyed upon? So he ends up going and getting himself a gun. So when he goes and he visits Will in the hospital, he's this angry guy. All he wants to do is he wants to get back at the person who shot Will, who put them in danger. And Will, when he hugs him, notices that the guy has a gun on him, that Carlton has a gun on him. And he reminds him, dude, this isn't you. This isn't the life that you want to be a part of. That's not what you're about. Don't run away from that. So he forces him to give him the gun. And you can tell that Carlton was really struggling. He was having an inner battle with himself. Then there was this other episode where they were in college. I think they were in their first couple of semesters in college, and they were trying to get into one of these frats. A frat is basically, for those who don't know, it's a brotherhood-like society that you get into a part of when you enter a lot of American universities. So there was this predominantly black frathood or brotherhood. I think they call them brotherhoods, and they were trying to be a part of it. And Carlton does everything that both Will and Carlton do everything that they ask of them. Like they were doing this thing called hazing, which is basically humiliating them, having them do really ridiculous things. And Carlton gets to the end and he performs everything that they ask of him. And at that particular point, Will goes and he talks to one of the senior guys in that brotherhood to ask if they got in. The guy tells him that, of course, Will got in, but Carlton didn't. Why? Because he was a sellout. Because he didn't show or display what a typical black man was supposed to be like. And that's it. That was the reason why he was being denied. And Carlton, after hearing that this is the reason why he wasn't going to be selected to be a part of this brotherhood, goes up to him and says like, dude, well, he doesn't say dude, but he tells him, listen, I'm going through the same struggles as you, man. I'm going through the same kind of resistance, life resistance that you're going through. I'm black. I'm just as black as you. Just because I like certain things that may not be stereotypically black doesn't take away from the fact that he is still a black man living in America. And that in itself doesn't justify him being denied the opportunity to be with other black people just because he doesn't like or do things in a particularly black, stereotypically black way. And that was a really, really powerful message. Then there was the episode where Uncle Phil and Will end up getting thrown in jail because they were stereotyped. There was racial stereotyping, and the officer that had arrested them couldn't believe that Uncle Phil was a judge. So it took them staying in jail pretty much overnight, making various calls to people who know exactly who Uncle Phil was to get them out. They addressed so many different things, and I don't have time to address every single episode. But why I wanted to talk about this was that show, going back to what I said earlier, was so impactful in my life, in many other people's lives out there. Whether you were black, white, or whatever, you got a glimpse of what life was like on both ends, and black people had something that they could relate to, and that's why the show was so popular. And that show, even Will talks about it, was the show that basically spearheaded his journey into acting, into becoming the world famous movie star that he is now. Because before then, he was a rapper. That's what he was known for. He was a musician. But then this show opened up a different world and a different trajectory in his career. So that was why this show was so important and impactful to him. So I am looking forward to eventually seeing what this reunion is going to look like. I just wanted to go down memory lane and talk about what Fresh Prince meant to me and the things that stood out about Fresh Prince of Bel-Air to me. It was an amazing show, and I'm really looking forward to what, and rest in peace, James Avery. He was the person who played Uncle Phil in the show, the father figure in that show. That particular scene where Will was venting to Uncle Phil, right? Where he was venting to him about how he didn't need his father after his father had walked out on him the second time, was a really powerful scene. And that's where you realized how much of a father, even J. Cole mentioned it in one of his songs, but that's how you realized how much of a father figure Uncle Phil was to Will in that show, because Will didn't have another father figure. And that's why it's important for people to have father figures in their lives, because they add a different perspective, a different dynamic, a different guiding hand especially in a young man's life. So that's why that relationship that they had in that show was important to show to other people around the world who were in situations where they didn't particularly have a father figure. Hopefully, Uncle Phil, being the kind of person that he was able to set an example for a new generation of men to basically be present in their children's lives. At least that's what I got from it. That's the message that I got from it. So yeah, so Fresh Prince of Bel-Air reunion and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. If you haven't watched Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, I don't know what rock you've been living under. But please go watch it. It's an amazing television show, hilarious at the same time, really, really deep in the messaging that goes on in that show. You'll enjoy it. Yeah. So that is what I had to say on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Now I want to leave you guys, as always, with a little bit of introspect, and I want to read out something to you, right? And actually, this, especially now that I've just talked about James Avery passing, right, and probably what his family was going through. But I want to read you something real quick, right? So it says, speak to people in a way that if they died the next day, you'd be satisfied with the last thing you said to them. How powerful is that, right? How powerful is that? Anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening to this here podcast. I really had a good time talking about Fresh Prince with you guys. And thank you so much for those of you guys who've been giving me feedback on my previous episodes. And thank you for coming back and returning. Thank you for introducing new people to this podcast. Hopefully we can grow a really, really nice community together, because that's what this whole thing is about, right? Just building a community. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to close it off here, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Peace.